morning, everybody. Welcome to OREA's Master Series latest webinar, all about farming. My name is Marissa Arnold. I will be your moderator today. I am a real estate broker and manager with Remax Crown Realty in Sudbury, and I'm also your Northern Ontario Director for the Ontario Real Estate Association. I'm going to kick us off by welcoming our two panelists this morning. We have Justin Bock and James Milonas. So welcome.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning. All right, so a couple of housekeeping items. If you have any questions, by all means, feel free to ask them. We would ask that you ask them in the Q&A section. So if you look at the bottom of your Zoom screen, you'll see a Q&A section. We will do our best to answer all of them. If we don't get to them, then I'm sure I am willing, and I'm sure James and Justin are willing to answer them at a later date. So let's kick this off. I'm going to lob this question to both of you. Maybe James, you can kick us off. How would you describe your farm, James?
So I have a very non-traditional farm. So when realtors think farming, they think flyers, they think door knocking, they think neighborhood specific. My farm is completely different. I am solely social media based. So my farm is the city of Toronto, and I farm it completely different. We'll get into it in a couple more questions, but I farm it completely different than the traditional realtor who farms.
Okay, and Justin?
Yeah, you know, I think I would have to say something similar to James. So like I do have sort of the traditional farm where I've done it in a neighborhood, but I also do it on a little bit more of a macro scale where I, you know, similar to James, focus on social media in terms of the content that I put out, also in my email blast to go to clients and really focus on, you know, their needs and their wants of what they're looking for in the particular, you know, Blue Mountain Collingwood area.
Awesome. Okay, so how did you get into farming? Oh, this question will be for both of you as well.
Yeah, so I mean, naturally, it just came to me. I didn't really realize that I was farming all these years, right? So back in 2013, I was one of the few realtors who was using Instagram for social media. And I eventually transitioned Instagram into TikTok, and it has just become, that is my actual farm. And it wasn't until I actually sat with someone who launches a farming program for realtors where he was like, dude, you farm. I'm like, no, I don't. Like, it's very different. He's like, but look at what you do and look at what the traditional farmer does. It's the exact same thing, just in a modern way. So it came, I guess, just naturally to me, not realizing that I was actually farming.
Okay, so it was not a conscious decision then, it just happened.
Exactly.
Okay, Justin, how did you get into farming?
So about 2 years ago, I started my business for the first almost 6 years in the GTA, worked out of Oakville. And 2 years ago, I made the decision to move full-time and move my business up to Collingwood and Blue Mountain. So obviously, you know, I did obviously know a few people up here, but more or less, you know, my database didn't exist up here at all. So it was just sort of one of those things where I was like, you know, I have to figure out a way to, you know, continue to do business, you know, have bills to pay, and make sure, and, you know, and also really, you know, get my feet wet in the new market and really learn the market inside and out. So.
Okay. So what methods do you use? James, you kind of touched on it a little bit. What methods do you use and what works for you?
So one of the things, so in the neighborhood that I wanted to farm, you know, and I'm sure, you know, very similar to James, where he puts the content out for the people, you know, that he wants to attract and work with. That was very similar, you know, to me. And we had a Facebook group for the neighborhood that I wanted to work in. And so that was a really great way for me to start, you know, really, you know, being very present in there, answering questions, being sort of a resource for people. You know, obviously, like a lot of that happened during, you know, the first wave of COVID. So, you know, everybody was sort of looking for a way to, you know, engage with neighbors, engage with, you know, other people, you know, in the neighborhood. So it was a really great way. And, you know, there was a lot of people that for the very first time, they were spending a lot more time up here too. So where do you go for groceries? Where's a good place for dinner? Where, you know, has anyone tried, you know, is there a good Thai restaurant nearby, like, you know, and it was just that sort of stuff that really just, you know, gave me an opportunity to sort of be that resource for, you know, a lot of people in that farming neighborhood that I wanted to, you know, to work in. So.
Great. So Facebook group and responding to people's needs in the community. Have you done anything else in terms of farming, or has it all been social media based?
So like that one's been like, so in that group there, like that's been a huge way for, you know, for me to, you know, to farm that neighborhood. I do market updates for that neighborhood as well. Inside the Facebook group, I never once put anything to do with real estate at all. Like I made a very conscious decision not to like advertise at all that I was a real estate agent. Obviously, a lot of people found out because they saw my listings in the area, or they you know, clicked on my profile and saw what I did for work. But I made a very conscious decision that I would never sort of advertise my services inside the Facebook group. And then that's where, like, on the side, then I'll go and do the postcards, you know, do sort of the traditional farming methods in the neighborhood.
Okay. Follow-up question for Justin from Patricia. How did you get people to join your Facebook neighborhood group?
Basically, you know, again, I think maybe COVID was sort of a blessing in disguise for growing that Facebook group, because, you know, again, people were lonely last year, right? I mean, they were looking for a place to connect. They wanted to, you know, we started having it as a place like where, you know, there was, you know, 5 o'clock, you know, driveway cocktails and stuff, because people, you know, were looking for, you know, for ways to connect. And then they were like, oh, you know, and then the conversation of like, oh yeah, this Facebook group exists. And, you know, even in my first 2 months of like, of being on that group, and then I became the admin of it as well. You know, there was so much chatter about it. You know, we'd be out knocking with the dogs, and there would, you know, somebody would, you know, make a comment on there like, oh yeah, like you're Justin from the group. And it was just quickly that, you know, that way to connect with people. And that's just really how people group, because the neighbors would just, oh, you have to join this group. It's a great place. It's a great place to connect. It's a great place where, you know, all the information is being posted. You know, and again, like, you know, I'm a huge proponent of, you know, of new neighborhoods for farming, because, you know, there's a lot of times, you know, a lot of times the builders don't cooperate with real estate agents. So a lot of people, when they went to go and buy the house from the builder, they had no representation. So they, you know, and a lot of, you know, and traditionally, because of the deposit structure, it's a really great way for first-time home buyers to get in the market. So there's no existing real estate relationship. There's no existing, you know, relationships within the community where, you know, these 7 people are friends and they're not friends with anybody else, and you can't get into that group and stuff like that. So, you know, it's a really great way for everybody wants to connect within a new community. And from a real estate perspective, you know, there isn't, you know, a lot of them are what we call like orphan clients, where they don't have an existing relationship at all with a real estate agent.
That's a really great point about new construction and new neighborhoods. Roxanne was asking what the Facebook group is in Blue Mountain. So if you could maybe just type it in the Q&A, that would be appreciated. James, what methods do you use for farming?
Again, solely social media. I don't door knock, I don't cold call, I don't flyer neighborhoods, but everything I do is social media based. The same way someone would flyer a neighborhood of, you know, they're just listed. I don't do that on social media. I think it's the tackiest thing ever. I really don't care to see a realtor's just listed, just sold posts. I find it boring. I find it tacky. I find it very outdated. So what I do is I showcase the property in a way that explains what it's like to live there, right? Like, have you ever wanted to look inside the candy factory lofts? Or are you curious about what the inside of this building actually looks like? Because nothing ever comes for sale. Little things like that, because it's that little hook at the beginning that keep them engaged. And then they might not comment right away, they might not connect with you later on, but what they will do is follow me in 6 to 7 months when they're ready to buy, and they're like, hey, that video, blah, 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 that's where I saw you. I think you're great. That's exactly what I'm looking for. So that's how I farm for my business and whatever. But in terms of the way realtors farm with their neighborhood, I do the same way on social media. So I collaborate with a lot of brands, right? I have PR, which is expensive as hell, but I have PR that gets me in front of people. So I go to events, right? I hang out with these people. I'm partnering with businesses where I'm doing giveaways with them, or I'm promoting their businesses. They're not paying me to promote their business, and I'm not doing it for any other reason than the fact that I support and I acknowledge that business. Sometimes I get a sponsor from a PR company. Hey, this brand's looking for you to come in and taste their food. Will you give them a review? Fine. If the food's great, I will. If not, I won't sign on to do it. But I'm promoting things in my neighborhood on social media because why? It's free. It's free. Social media is the easiest way to grow your business because it's free. I have not paid for a single ad, and I'll talk on Facebook ads in a few minutes from now, but it's all free and it's easy to do.
Awesome. Okay, so next question for both of you. Is it better to farm one particular area over and over again, or is it more important to farm multiple areas? Go ahead, James.
One, focus on one neighborhood. You can't focus on, I don't know, I'm going to pick Richmond Hill, Newmarket, and St. Catharines. That's 3 completely different towns. But within those towns, all these different communities. You can't farm too many because it gets too big and too expensive. So focus on one that you live and work. You don't have to actually live in it. If there's one you just want to work in, right? Focus on that. Focus your efforts there. It keeps the cost down and it's easier to manage because that way you're hitting people at the appropriate time and you're not wearing yourself out. Because if your farm is too big and you can't manage it, things are going to fall through the cracks and you're going to lose consistency.
Okay. Justin, do you have anything to add there?
Yeah, I will say, I would say, yeah, I would definitely agree with James. One is better to do and to hit them hard as opposed to, reducing your efforts across. I think the one thing about farming that I've noticed for myself that has worked really, really well is when I picked my farm, I really understood the people that belong, like that are part of that farm. And I think that's really, really crucially important. I think that's also, to the point of picking one farm, because it's really hard to, to dissect and understand, 30 different farms and, reduce your efforts to that. When you get really, really like intimate with your farm and like understand the language and the things that they like to do and the places that they like to go, and that's really what I think is a huge part of a successful farm, because you're able to, when you're putting out all the content for them, it makes sense. Like in my market, like one of the postcards that we are putting out is like is next week, because next week the cost of the 5x7 ski pass goes up. So it's like a last minute notice of like, hey, don't forget on the 17th of October, the 5x7 ski pass is going to go up in price, and this is your last chance for early bird. Like that's really ultra relevant information. The community that I farm, you can throw a rock to the base of Blue Mountain. So like that is like ultra relevant to the people that live in that neighborhood. That's why they bought there. That's why they live there. That's why they have their, a secondary home there.
All right. So what are some traditional methods of farming? That was a question from Yang. I'm hoping to elaborate a little bit on traditional methods of farming.
Go ahead, Justin.
Yeah, I'll talk about this because obviously I do this more than James does. So, when a lot of times when people talk about the traditional farming methods, it's postcards, it's, the just listeds, just solds, it's door knocking after a property is sold, whether or not you were the one who sold it. Cold calling after a property has sold in that neighborhood, after you've sold one, those are the types of things that are, would be considered the sort of the, traditional methods of marketing. So I do a little bit of that, again, because I do it in a very specific neighborhood, along with, the social media side of it, is that like when I do have a listing, I'm making sure that I am putting out like, the just listed, just sold postcards, because that's again, the way that I'm advertising that I'm active in that group, not really talking about real estate in that group at all, but here's how I am, but I also do work in this neighborhood as well. And that's how I do the traditional side. And then I do some of the, the other content, like I said, like, the notes for the, the 5x7 pass.
So I don't door knock, but there are a lot of agents who will door knock my listings, like in my office. And one thing that it actually came from my coach that I work with. calls it the 10-10-20 rule. So if you have a listing, you door knock the 10 houses to the left, the 10 houses to the right, and the 20 houses across the street that you've just listed and then just sold that house, because their eyes are on it, because they're going to see your coming soon sign or your exclusive sign. They're going to see it listed, they're going to see it sold, and they're going to want to know, right? They're going to want to know what it's sold for. They're going to want to know what their house is worth. So that's a really good way to get in front of people if you are starting to grow in a neighborhood. And I know only because I've known Justin for like a decade and I know how he runs his business. He did something very similar, both working in Oakville and up in the Collingwood region. So getting in front of the people in front and across in the listing will definitely help you if you want to grow in that neighborhood.
So are you doing your door knocking in person, or are you having Canada Post do it for you, or are you just dropping flyers at the door? How is that all working for you? I know with COVID that probably has had an impact.
So one of the things, another realtor in my office, like years and years ago, you know, she would do, like, she farms a few neighborhoods that are all very similar, and she's picked neighborhoods that, you know, are 60 to 100 homes. And basically the reason that she did that was because she was able to be very intentional with the pieces, like the marketing pieces that were on there, and so like she goes door to door with that instead of doing through Canada Post. So she'll just like go and like stuff them in their, you know, you know, their door handle, or, you know, put them in their door, in their mailbox if it's a neighborhood that has a mailbox in it. You know, and her rationale was for that was that she has an opportunity to, potentially, you know, run into somebody and talk to them face to face. But again, like the second piece of it, it gets them to be really ultra relevant. If you're putting out content, if you're putting out postcards that have like just listed and has 7 different home types on there, it's very hard for a person to dissect it. But if you say, you listen, your 3-story townhouse just sold for, you know, $550,000, that's something that's it's immediately able to dissect that and actually like feel like it's relevant to them. And I think, again, like that relevant piece, I'll say it over and over again, like if you're going to farm, you have to be relevant to your farm. And by the way, that agent that does that, this year she was in the top 1% of realtors in Canada with Royal LePage. So I mean, she definitely if she can do it and go door to door still, anybody can, because she's obviously, you know, very busy.
And there's another way to door knock too if you're in condos. So I sell predominantly condos. If I sell a listing, the first thing I do is I just write handwritten notes addressed to the homeowner. I never use GeoWarehouse because 1, it's illegal, but 2, just straight homeowner, 123 Main Street, unit 104. And I do the entire rise. So if I sold an 04 unit, I do 104, 204, 304, 404, the whole way up the building. And I let them know, because 9 times out of 10, if you know the building well enough, you know the entire 04 stock is going to be the same unit. So, you know, I just sold this 1-bedroom in Den. We had 6 offers. There are still 5 more people looking. If you're looking to sell, this is what we got. And it's a great way to start a conversation, because you're not really trying to sell them anything other than informing them. And if they're interested, then they're going to call you. So it's a really good way to grow your business without actually having to physically knock on the door, because it's really hard in condos to do that.
Great. Okay, if I don't have any client base to start with, what would be the best starting point? As a new sales representative, what would be the recommended action plan I should follow? How do I get started?
Sorry, my screen froze. Marissa, can you repeat the question?
Okay, so as a new sales representative with no contacts in the area, this might be a really great question for Justin, because you recently moved. How do I get started? Where do I find clients? How does that all work?
Yeah, I mean, like I said, I mean, even before I had moved up there, I had decided that was sort of the farm market that I wanted to. That particular neighborhood has like basically 3 different types of people in that group. One is investor clients. A lot of people do own like pure rental properties in there, and I lease out and manage a lot of their properties now. The second type of people that are full-time are full-timers. They've moved up from the city, so they have a very similar story to myself, where, you know, I've, you know, lived in the GTA and moved up to moved up to Collingwood and Blue Mountain, you know, for a very specific, you know, lifestyle choice. And then the third group of people are vacationers. So, you know, for me, that's why I chose that market, because I really understood the people that lived in that market, and it was really easy for me to, you know, to sort of put all of my marketing pieces like geared towards those types of people. So, I mean, yeah, I mean, if you don't have clients, like, you know, I don't know who this person is, that thing there, but like find something that you're passionate about and just like start like, you know, and like, you know, whether it's a running group or whether it's anything like that, like similar to James, like that's how you like people, that's how you can also start farming as well, is like be part of the groups, be part of the people, like-minded people, like-minded people, right? Same attracts same. So, you know, if you're, you know, when people watch James's TikToks, like they're not the, like, you know, the haters aren't people that are going to call James to list their property. The people that like love watching his TikToks, love watching the content that he puts out, they're going to, you know, they find his stuff funny and, or, you know, or informational, resourceful, and, you know, and they're going to pick up the phone and, you know, or probably, you know, slide into his DMs and send him a message. So, you know, that's really it. Like, just be intentional with everything you do and be consistent, and like really, like that's how you will start to attract clients in sort of whatever medium that you're going to start using for you know, for farming.
And that's the biggest word right there is consistency, right? So if you, there was a comment that I answered in the Q&A to the person who asked the question, but he hadn't seen results in his farm over 1 year. Farming is not a 1 year thing. It's a 3 to 5 year thing. There's a reason why the James the City brand is one of the most social media sought after brands in the city of Toronto, because it's been 10 years in the making, right? Like it's to the point where I walk down the street and people recognize me from TikTok, and I've only been on TikTok for a year versus 10 years of selling real estate, right? It's consistency. Every Thursday, there's a building I'm trying to break into. So every Thursday I work out of the lobby bar, and I'm there from 10 to 1 every single Thursday. And I make sure I'm loud. I am loud on the phone, and I hate talking. I'm a millennial. I hate talking on the phone. I will call my mom and I will like ask her to talk about real estate for 10 minutes because I hate talking on the phone, right? And it's all about getting in front of people. And if you want to be in that neighborhood, you're going to make yourself known. So, you know, if Justin wanted to break into the Windfall community when he moved up there, he's not only going to just sit around his house and wait for someone to come to him, he's going to go to the local coffee shop and work out of there. And he's going to talk about real estate, because the minute someone hears open house or for sale, they're like, what? And they listen and they tune in.
Okay, so one of the questions that we got before the webinar started was, how long did it take before you saw success? James, you just touched on this, but maybe elaborate a little bit more about that.
Yeah, so I mean, Instagram took me probably 3 years to really start getting momentum from it. So I used to do 90% of my business from Instagram and like 10% from my database, because my database is very young, right? It's people under 30, and it's a very young group of individuals. Now it's 98% from TikTok, and it has just grown exponentially. I don't think I've had one deal from Instagram this year. The rest has all been TikTok, and it's people who I've never met before. Usually with Instagram, it's people who I, you know, played sports with, or I worked with, or I went to school with, because it's just an easy way to stay in touch. I guess it was like the millennial version of Facebook, right? TikTok, I know no one, but they come to me, and it's not like it's people our age who are connecting with me. It's the moms, right? Like half of my clients that found me this year from TikTok, it's been their moms that have found me and said, you need to call James to buy your first place, or you need to call James to sell your condo. And that's how it's been. So it's just, again, consistency, and it's being relevant to what you're talking about. It's being open, it's being real, and it's being authentic. So, you know, Justin touched on a point where I have a lot of haters. I do. If you guys follow me on social media, you know I get trolled like crazy, and it's insane, but I clap back and I make it funny, right? And that's what gets me business, because I'm authentic, I'm real, I'm raw, and people live for it.
Okay. Justin, we'll lob this question to you. How long until you saw success with your farming efforts?
I got my first listing in the farm after 6 months of, about 6 months.
Okay.
Yeah, and then it's been consistent since. And I will tell you, like one of the best phone calls that I got was last November, and someone called me, and I wasn't connected with them on social media, and they're like, you know, we've been watching all of your stuff for the last sort of 6 months and everything that you've put out, and we love the way that you photograph and, you know, stage your listings, and, you know, we hope that you can come and do the same, you know, for our property. And, you know, and they're like, you know, and then, you know, even one of the questions was, because like staging is a huge part of my business and my brand that I've built. And, you know, they were like, you know, their first question, like, you know, do you think that our house is going to look as nice as the other ones? I'm like, yes, we will make it, you know, know, your house is going to look, but you know, like, but they were slowly watching. I'd never connected with these people. They've never commented on anything. They've never, you know, liked any of my posts, like, you know, through my, like the social media ads that I put out and stuff like that, like nothing, but like they, you know, they were watching.
Okay. And so how do you guys maintain that success? If you're saying it took 6 months or 3 to 5 years, how do you keep that up?
Like a plan. So I have a content calendar that I write a year in advance, and it's everything from like my daily real estate specific nonsense to my neighborhood updates. So because I farm the entire city of Toronto, because my brand is James in the city. So I give neighborhood updates from like Cabbagetown to Parkdale to Roncesvalles to Yorkville to the Annex to, you know, Chinatown East, North Chinatown. Like there's a whole bunch of little communities, and then within that, it's breaking down my favorite businesses, because people want to know, what am I doing, right? If I'm going to spend a day in Cabbagetown, what am I doing? Well, I'm going to go to Jet Fuel for coffee. I'm going to walk through Riverdale Farms. I'm probably going to have lunch at the House on Parliament, right? People want to know that, because if they're looking to move into the neighborhood, they want to know what you're into. So when Justin moved up to Collingwood, my partner and I were looking to buy an investment property up there. And I said to Justin, like, what are your favorite spots, right? Like, where do I want to be in the Collingwood region? And he was like, you have to have dinner here. You have to have dinner here. You're kind of missing this, things like that. And it just really, it really spoke to me in a way that, as a new person to the neighborhood, is like, okay, he obviously is the industry expert, because he obviously, like, and he's a friend, he knows and works there, but he's promoting things that he loves and believes in. And if I wanted to go spend a day, even if I wasn't buying, if I wanted to spend a day up in Collingwood, where would I go? I would probably turn to someone like Justin. So it's having that plan and being consistent with it, so your people know exactly what you're doing. And being consistent to it is going to keep you accountable.
Right. So when we're starting out, how big should the farm be? I know you mentioned just one specific neighborhood that you want to work in, but number of people, maybe Justin, this might be a better question for you to touch on, because you do use a little bit more traditional methods. So how big should the farm be?
I'm just going to roll back for just 1 second here, just for that one question of how do you stay sort of consistent here. I read, there was a comment here in the thing by Sarah Backer, and she said that the best part about this method is that you're attracting good clients, that you share the same ideas, lifestyles, etc. That is how you end up loving what you do and stay away from those nightmare clients you hear about. I think that's a very on point comment about the charming and staying consistent, because when you end up doing what you love, like, you know, if part of James, like part of James's method is like, you know, going to fashion stuff, going to restaurants, going to the hotels, lobby bars, and like all that, like that's part of James' brand. Like that's not work for James. Correct me if I'm wrong, but like that, like those are fun things that James gets to do that end up attracting his ideal clients. Me, I get to go skiing and I get to be at the restaurants up here promoting that, like doing the things that I love to do, and like, and attracting that, like it becomes, and then of course, once you start seeing the results from it and actually starts getting business from it, it just becomes a lot easier and becomes a lot, you know, sort of easier to manage, as opposed to it being like, you know, difficult work. The other piece of it is that, like, you know, a lot of the, so like now that I have, you know, have established business in that farming neighborhood, when I do like client pop-bys, like for instance, like, you know, this past year, like in the summer, I did 6 different beers and ciders from a local cider house up here. You know, my clients were then posting it on their social medias, their Facebook pages, and then other people from the neighborhood who I haven't like worked with were liking and seeing like their comments. So when you start picking up momentum and you start doing things like Popeyes, other people also start to become your advocates as well.
Awesome.
Sorry, I didn't want to forget about that part, because I was reading that comment from Sarah and I thought that it was a very good comment.
No, that's a really good point. That's a really good point. I think being genuine and being real and being yourself is at the core of any successful social media or farming. So that's a really good point. Okay, so how big should your farm be? Let's get back to that.
I would say 400 to 700 houses is a good spot to start in, because if you're factoring in the cost of a flyer, so both print and like sending out through Canada Post, it's a manageable number, and it's also, there's enough homes in there for good turnover, because you want a really high turnover rate where there's not one person dominating. So I would say between 400 to 700 homes to start.
Okay. Any comments, Justin?
I would agree with that. So the neighborhood that I farm, when the build is done, there's going to be like 675 homes in there. So it's very manageable. You know, I started it when there was about 200, and it will grow up to being about 700. The piece of it, like if you are going to choose a neighborhood that you're going to rely on, like on traditional methods like postcards, it is very important to look at the Canada Post postal walk. One of the reasons I would never really be able to use Canada Post is because up here in Collingwood and Blue Mountain, we have one postal code starting. We're like almost all of Collingwood and Blue Mountain is all L9Y. So it's really, really difficult up here to advertise anything through the postal walks up here, because like the geographical area is just so massive. So I would be advertising to 3,000 people and putting out really irrelevant stuff and that 3,000 people would hit totally different areas, totally different homes, and totally different types of people as well. So
great. Okay, so next question. I think this is a really important question for some of the newer agents out there. How do you farm an area that has other more popular and prominent agents? And how do you position yourself as an authority figure in that area when there may already be one?
That's a you question, Justin, because I mean, you just went through that.
Yeah, I mean, you know what? I think ultimately speaking, I think the same thing that I said before, where like-minded people attract like-minded people and same attract same, is that there might be somebody that has done the business up in your area and has been the figure up here. But, and a lot of them is, and they may do an absolutely amazing job for their clients, but there might be, a personality clash. Maybe they don't like that person, but, they obviously want good results for their property, because at the end of the day, it is business and it is a business decision. But when that business decision can also be coupled with somebody that they actually really like and get along with, that's a win-win for everybody, because that's also how you establish those long-term relationships. There are a lot of, people up here that have used other agents in the past, and now, now that they've met me, and I know who they've worked with in the past, they're like, oh, this has been a much better experience. Like, and now I've, already started to see referrals from them. Right. So, I think that's that's important. Like, just because there is one person that like dominates that area, like there might be like, there's another agent in Windfall that does, that has picked up some clients now in that area, but her and I personalities are completely different. She's a mom, like, so, a lot of the moms like will resonate, the content that she puts out will resonate with that, and they might not resonate with me, like, and that's totally okay, because I would rather work with people that I really, really want to work with, and vice versa. And I mean, obviously being 9 years in the business, obviously I have that ability to be a little bit more choosy with people that I work with. But I mean, ultimately it is very important to have a really good relationship with your people, because not every market is going to see houses selling in 7 days, and that relationship sometimes will need to be 3, 6, and 9 months long to be able to, get through the sale and the buy process with that client. So like having a good relationship is very, very important.
Great. Okay, so I don't know if this question will be relevant to both of you, because you have really specific niches and types of people that you farm, but what about reaching out to older people that aren't on social media? Have you ever given that any thought?
No. And I know it sounds rude, but no, it's not my demographic. I mean, we've had Vanessa, who's one of our committee members, on here before, and her mom, Lynn, who's our business partner, heavily deals with seniors and downsizers, right? That's her niche. Then it's a certain way of dealing with the aging population of home sellers and buyers. And it's not something that I can personally work with. It's not my style. It's not my speed. It's too slow for me. And I just can't connect with them. I can't be authentic. So I know my lane and I stick to it.
Okay. Justin, anything to add there? I know you sort of touched on it before, but.
Yeah, I mean, I think the thing is like, if James you know, has like his TikTok followers and he gets business from there, like there's a chance that, you know, the daughter that's watching, you know, that TikTok may say to their grandparent, oh, like, you know, you have this, you know, this property that's in this neighborhood, you know, this guy is the guy that needs to sell your property. So like they become your little mini advocates as well. And again, to James' point, like, you know, if that's who ends up, you know, then there maybe he partners with another agent who has more patience for that, or he refers it off when it, you know, if that's really something that feels uncomfortable about. But I think ultimately speaking, like, you know, when you keep all of your content super specific to the people that you really want to work with, by a byproduct, you will get offshoot referrals and, you know, people advocating on your behalf that, you know, that you're the authority, you're the person that needs to be worked with, whether or not that, like, that person is who you were initially, you know, speaking to, you know, in your content.
Yeah. For the record, I don't think either of you are being ageist when you say that. If you just specifically are targeting a younger demographic, there's nothing wrong with that. I think if anyone is interested in targeting an older demographic, reach out to us and we could connect you with some great realtors within the YPN committee that would be happy to talk to you about that.
And for I actually really do, and not to, because what you just said, but I actually do really love, there was actually a whole year where I got a ton of referrals. I started off and I sold one person's condo that was going into a retirement home, and she literally like told 6 of her friends to list with me. And for like 1 year, I almost exclusively worked with downsizers, senior single females. It was very fun, actually. So it was, but yeah, but that actually referral came from someone whose grandmother it was. So
okay.
Yeah.
Awesome. Okay, so back to traditional farming. If I'm farming a neighborhood and I'm doing door knockers or flyers or whatever, how often should I be touching that neighborhood or dripping to them or sending out a flyer or a door knocker?
I mean, I would say you can probably cycle through your farm, touching them like in person once a week, sort of like once a month. So if you were door knocking these 5 streets at the beginning of the month, you're probably going to hit them at the beginning of this month as well. So you're going to cycle through it. If you're door knocking it, your flyers should be consistent every 2 weeks, right? Because once a month is not enough. You got to be in front of them. And then coupled in with, if you're actually living and working in that neighborhood, it's going to be, you're just listed, you're just sold, you're coming soon, your open house, your twilight, your agent preview, whatever the case is. So they're going to get a lot from you. And it's up to you to say, is this too much or not enough? And I can honestly say there's never enough.
Okay, anything to add there, Justin?
I would say like every 2 weeks is definitely important. And I think, again, like sort of being relevant, like obviously, like, you know, the first couple months of ski season, there's really not much going on. No one's moving, no one's really thinking about it, no one's really paying attention to anything else. Same thing with like the 2 months in the summer. So like, again, like if it, you know, the budget's an issue and you like, you know, and you want to look at your market and say, okay, like I have enough budget to touch them X amount of times. How can I break that down strategically? Again, it's understanding, you know, that market and knowing, like, you know, if budget's an issue, that like you can spread it out in strategic ways. But again, like every 2 weeks, if you're going to be really consistent and like, and again, and you're trying to break into something, it is very, very important to do that. So.
Okay. Does your farm have a life expectancy? James?
I don't think so.
No?
No. I think there's a time where you may outgrow it if you're done or you want to get into real estate. That's fine. You can always sell.